joined today by Arit Anderson. Arit, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. It's nice to be here. It's always kind of like, yeah, you kind of see people on screens and you're like, right, I can see a face. So it's much better than a phone call.
Absolutely right. I agree. It's so much better. So listen, let me. You began your career in the retail, fashion, creative events industry. What led you to leave them to move into the world of garden design? How did you get there?
Well, it's a funny old route, really, yeah. Because as you say, I did it for nearly 25 years in fashion. I'd worked in like high street for high street brands in head offices and stuff like that, which I really did love and enjoyed. But I had also given myself a timeline of I don't want to be doing fashion at 50, mainly because. You know, it was just so that I would know that I'd move on. I'm a girl that likes to do many things. When I was doing my main career in fashion retail, I was also, alongside that, and I was working part-time as a holistic therapist. So that was also a little sideline. And then when I, with one of the jobs that I worked at, when I was at Marks and Spencer's, and we did kind of these big events. So there was a point when I was wanting to change roles. I was been doing merchandising for quite a bit. And I wanted to kind of get more into the creative side. And I was doing a little bit more on events. So when I went and worked for the event management, it was great because working in retail, it's very cyclical and you're, oh, it's autumn again. Oh, it's spring again. And, you know, whereas when you do an event, it's completely unique, has a complete different experience to it. And it has a date where it has to be delivered on. So I can send in a pack of jumpers into a shop and they'll sell over 12, 15 odd weeks. Whereas I've got my event, I have to do it there and then for the client. So it's totally different discipline. So that was really great. And then I know it sounds really kind of a bit obvious, but when I then moved and got a house with a garden, I thought, oh, you know what? My sister, who's a gardener, she'll come and do all the gardening. Great. I'll come home in a frock, glass of wine, dead head, maybe a bit of watering. That was the plan. And then, as a lot of gardeners will say, you get the garden, you get going, and yeah, I got a little bit bitten by it. And the last job that I was at, they were looking at making redundancies, and and I was crawling toward 50, not quite. And I thought, hey, maybe that change is coming in now. So that's kind of, you know, I just jumped basically and thought, right, okay, let's do something different.
And kind of before I delve into it, just kind of in terms of that jump, kind of I appreciate the timeline of kind of age, etc. But for a lot of people who are making moves in terms of their careers, etc., what kind of was it a natural thing over I'm just going to do it, or did you have to work up the courage to leave things more?
To be honest, the actual timeline of it, because I was so this was 2010 when I got the house in the sort of September. Was gardening through that season, and by the time I got to July, and I was a novice gardener, I hadn't gardened before. Okay, that's not clear. So when it got to about the July, and there was talks of these redundancies and things, it was kind of almost looking inward and going, okay, but if I did leave fashion, what? And I'm getting that bit older. What do I love doing? And it was at that moment that I loved being in the garden. So I sort of decided, as the redundancy process was going through, do you know what? You're going to do something that you love now. You've got to look, you know, you're no longer out clubbing every night. You're being a grown-up. And what is going to sort of well, you know, but, you know, what's going to sustain you? And so it was really, I guess, within a space of a year. And I guess one thing to say, Nick, is that I am one of those people who's not frightened of change, because that's what life is about. Life is a series of changes that occur, and our experience of life is how we respond to those changes. And that's what makes it rich and dynamic. So I always tend to throw a ball a little bit ahead of myself. Obviously, I woke up on January 2012 and went, okay, right, I'm going to be a gardener. And then the 2nd of January, I was like, I don't know anything. I thought I'd deal with that. And you know, what I did was put in the gap between getting onto college course in the September, I still used my retail skills to do consultancy to keep some money coming in. So I think it was just being really on the edge of having to, I've got to get money in, but I've got to retrain. Whereas up until then, I'd had a PAYE job, which kind of can sometimes make you a little bit comfortable because you just know that your paycheck's coming in every month. So that first step of being self-employed, I guess, made me realise it's down to me. If I don't get out of bed, I don't eat.
Can I ask on that? Can I kind of apologise that I'm not a keen gardener, so my ignorance shows out here. But and you mentioned the college. Was it like you knew you had to get the kind of the book training in order to be a good gardener, or did that come later, that process?
Well, it came, so how it first started, that I was going to be doing sort of more hands-on gardening in private garden. So I was just using the experience that I'd learned in that last year and slowly going to a friend's house and then another friend, and then maybe, just little recommendations like that. And of course, a lot of people do garden through experience as opposed to necessarily going to college. But it was my sister who is the gardener that said, I think you've got a little bit more creative flair in you than just doing just pure gardening. And the design side of it would probably suit you because, of course, of the background that you've come from. So from that perspective, yes, it was about, okay, I need training on that because I wasn't a designer in my previous job, but the discipline of design of a space is definitely needed to be taught. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Let me ask, something that fascinates me in the kind of 12 years that you kind of you've kind of on your career path of this. Has the public's relationship with open spaces and gardens and flora and fauna, how have we changed and developed?
Well, I think that one thing that I've noticed. So when I did my first show garden on my own, I did a show garden in Hampton Court in 2016, and it was about climate change and renewable energies and all of that type of thing. But interestingly, only in 2016. It wasn't really still that people were very much relating the garden to the environment. There wasn't really that sort of language. The sort of environmental issues were still very sort of over there, political, someone else will deal with it. The public wasn't really being engaged as being participative in some of the potential environmental help that they could be given. So I've definitely seen over the course of from sort of that time to now, much more general conversation and communication about gardens and the connection to the environment and how they can impact and help. So that has definitely changed. And I think the public are now feeling, they understand climate change more. They understand the environmental damage. They understand about biodiversity loss a lot more. So now they want to go, well, how can we help? And obviously through a garden, you can.
And then for you, how kind of do you bear a weight of responsibility in terms of the education for people about this and for promotion? And is that always the case, or is that something that's come on as you've got more experienced?
Well, I think, as I've gotten more experience, and I guess where my own sort of interests lay, which were, it kind of come, if you like, Nick, from when I first started gardening, knowing that I was going into a new career and a new territory, as it were. That question come up in my mind, being the little Virgo that I am. How do I know that I'm doing more harm than good? Because there's lots of things that occur in gardens that can be quite detrimental to the environment in terms of the materials or how we design our gardens, etc. So I was like, beginning to ask this question. And also because when I worked in retail, I'd also done a lot of teaching and training. So I felt that when I had the opportunity to go into TV, which was after my show garden got televised, I thought, well, the television for me was very much a medium as to how to help educate people. It's not about me trying to be some TV star. It was a case, this is about how it's a medium of communication, which I'm really passionate about. So that's just grown, more and more, joining the Gardeners World team, being able to obviously not offer 30 years of gardening experience because I don't have that, but being able to be the new inquirer that says, so how do we garden differently? How do we become more sustainable? And so that's very much the sort of strand and lead that I have in my pieces that I do for Gardeners World and on onward writing, etc.
So it makes perfect sense to me. Thank you for that. So kind of one last question, which I think kind of bringing it back to the world of speaking, is therefore kind of, if you're standing across stage and speaking to an audience, what are the key parts you're trying to get across to that audience in that kind of hour-long session?
Well, one thing that I I like to chat. Okay, so that's one thing.
I enjoy it.
I like people, and I think people sort of look at me when I say that and think, yeah, so do I. And I'm like, well, not everybody does like people in terms of the engagement. They can sometimes like their topic, want to deliver it, and get off stage. Whereas I really enjoy being able to impart knowledge where I have it, ask questions, put questions and thought processes out there for people to think about. And I think I'm definitely not the sort of person that is coming at it from a finger wagging type perspective or a holier than thou perspective. I'm learning this alongside you. This is what I've learned today. And what are you doing? And how do you think about certain things? Because of my varied many things that I've done, there's also the holistic side comes back into play, because I care about how people feel about themselves and about the topics that they're talking about. So I tend to make sure that within talks, that of course there's an educational part, but then there's also hopefully a part where somebody can be reflective, talk about themselves. Having also worked for corporate companies myself, obviously in my retail days, I understand that there is a deliverable that has to happen for companies, that their staff need to come away having learned something. It's not just a jolly away day or a half hour to get out of the office type thing. I know that there could be deliverables. So I've often spoken with the provider, the sort of, whether it's the HR teams or the events team, and just making sure that, well, what are some of your objectives, so that it's collaborative before I've got on stage. It's not just on I come, throw it out there and walk off. That there are the aims and objectives are being met of the company as well, because they're the paying client.
On that note, I think that's kind of the perfect note. That was all music to my ears. Thank you so much indeed. Been a pleasure speaking to you today, and have a lovely day.
Yeah, and you. Take care, Nick.
Cheers.